Let me tell you something right now. Nobody wakes up with confidence. Nobody rolls out of bed magically fearless, perfectly ready, totally sure of themselves. That version of confidence you're waiting for. It doesn't exist, and if you keep waiting to feel it before you move, you'll be stuck in the exact same place a year from now. Confidence is not something you find, it's something you build. It's not a personality trait, it's a skill. A muscle, you earn it through action. You train it by doing the things that scare you, not avoiding them. You've been told to wait until you're ready, until you've figured it all out, until the fear goes away. But here's the truth. The people who look confident, they didn't wait. They acted. They showed up when their hands were shaking, when their voices were unsteady, when their minds were full of doubt. And they did it anyway. They kept going. They kept stepping forward, rep after rep. That's where confidence is built. Not in your head, not in your journal, but in your behavior. So stop searching for it. Start building it. Let's break that down right now. You don't need to feel ready. That's the trap. That's the lie that's keeping you stuck. You think readiness is a feeling, that one day you'll wake up and suddenly you'll be full of certainty and fire and clarity. That's not how it works. You're never going to feel fully ready to do the hard things, the uncomfortable things, the meaningful things. Readiness is not a feeling that shows up before you act. It's a state you step into because you act. The more you wait for the feeling, the longer you stay in the loop of hesitation and delay. Every breakthrough in your life begins with a moment where you weren't ready, but you moved anyway. The job you landed, the relationship you started, the challenge you took on. You didn't know exactly what you were doing, but you leaned in, and that single moment of movement, of doing something instead of thinking about everything, shifted everything. That's the pattern you have to repeat, not perfectly, not confidently, just consistently. Action is the ignition, movement is the momentum. You think you need motivation, clarity, or permission. What you actually need is to go. There's a few seconds, right before you do something uncomfortable, where your brain lights up with resistance. That's the gap. That's where most people lose. It happens in the pause. That split second where you hesitate and let doubt take the wheel. But you can train yourself to recognize that moment and beat it. When you feel that hesitation rise, count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And move. Don't think. Don't analyze. Don't wait for the fear to pass. Just start. Start messy. Start unsure. Start while your hands are shaking and your heart is pounding. You think courage is a feeling. It's not. Courage is a decision. It's you standing face with your excuses and saying, I'm doing it anyway. It's getting up when you'd rather stay down. Making the call when you'd rather disappear. Taking the step when you don't know the outcome. That's power. And the wild thing, every single time you move without feeling ready, you take a brick out of the wall that's been holding you back. Your mind starts to rewire. You start to build a new identity. One of someone who shows up, who follows through, who doesn't wait for the perfect moment. The perfect moment is a myth. It's a delayed tactic dressed up as strategy. There is no perfect time. There's just now, right now, this moment. That's the only real thing you can control. Every time you choose to take action in the now, you're casting a vote for your future self. You're building momentum, and momentum compounds. One small action leads to another. One tiny decision leads to clarity. And suddenly, you're not stuck anymore. Suddenly, you're in motion. And that's the key. When you're in motion, resistance loses its grip. Don't wait to feel like it. Don't wait for energy. Don't wait for confidence. Build your life on movement, not mood, because mood lies. Mood is weather. It changes without warning. Movement, though, is reliable. It's honest. It gives you feedback. You might not be in control of how you feel, but you're always in control of what you do next. And that next step is the difference between spiraling and rising. Between regret and progress, between wishing and becoming. Your brain is wired to keep you safe, not successful. That's why it resists the unfamiliar. But your job isn't to feel safe, it's to grow. And growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in motion. You don't break limits by thinking about them. You break them by taking one uncomfortable action at a time, and the beautiful part, the more you move, the more natural it becomes. The fear doesn't vanish, but it shrinks. The doubt doesn't disappear, but it quiets, because now you have proof. Proof that you're capable. Proof that you're becoming. There's a lie that says you have to feel confident before you show up. But the truth is, you show up to become confident. Confidence is evidence you've done the hard thing before, and that only comes from doing it scared, doing it unprepared, doing it while your voice trembles and your hands shake. Confidence is a byproduct of action. It's not a requirement for it. So don't wait for it. Create it. The people who win aren't braver or smarter or luckier. They've just mastered the skill of moving before they feel ready. They understand the power of doing something small now instead of waiting for something big later. They stop negotiating with their emotions and start choosing their future in the present. Excuses are not the truth. They sound true, they feel true, but they're not. They're reflexes. They're habits dressed up as reasons. You tell yourself you're too tired, too busy, not ready, not qualified, not motivated. You repeat these phrases so often, they start to feel like facts. But they're just neural loops. Well, practice thought patterns that have been carved into your brain from years of repetition. You've trained yourself to say them without even thinking. And just like any other habit, they can be broken. But first, you have to stop believing them. You have to recognize them for what they are, mental routines, not reality. That voice in your head telling you it's not the right time. That's not wisdom, that's resistance. That hesitation, that rationalization, that perfectly worded reason why you'll start tomorrow. It's not logic, it's avoidance. It's fear in disguise. And if you don't call it out, it runs the show. You stop moving forward not because of actual barriers, but because of practiced hesitation. You're not trapped by your circumstances, you're trapped by the stories you've rehearsed. And those stories, they're just habits, and you don't need to wait for them to disappear. You just need to stop repeating them. You have to catch yourself in the moment. That split second when you're about to say, "I'll do it later," or "This isn't the right time," or "I'm not in the mood." That's the moment the excuse habit fires. And if you're not conscious, you'll obey it like it's law. But if you pause, if you interrupt the loop, even for a second, you create space to choose differently. You can say, "Wait, is that actually true? Or is it just what I've always said?" That one question can crack open everything. Because awareness breaks automation, and excuses are automation. They're not decisions, they're defaults. Most people don't even realize how patterned their self-sabotage is. You think each excuse is new, is specific to this situation. But if you wrote them down, you'd notice they're the same every time. Same language, same tone, same trigger, like clockwork. And if they're predictable, they're programmable. You can rewire them, but only if you stop defending them. Because every time you defend your excuse, you strengthen the habit. Every time you justify your delay, your inaction, your distraction, you deepen the groove. And that groove becomes your identity if you let it. You are not your excuses. You are not your hesitation. You are not your patterns. You are the one who notices the pattern. You are the one who can override it. You don't need to feel different. You don't need to think positive. You just need to act against the excuse. That's how you take your power back. The action doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be opposite of the excuse. Tired, move anyway. Don't have time, do 5 minutes. Don't know how, start messy. That tiny act is a hammer to the habit. And if you do it enough times, you break it. Every excuse has a payoff. That's why it lives. It gives you relief, comfort, safety, but it also costs you momentum, progress, self-respect. And when the cost finally outweighs the comfort, that's when change happens. When staying stuck becomes more painful than doing the hard thing. But you don't have to wait until it hurts. You can decide now. Decide that just because something feels true doesn't mean it is true. Decide to act on your goals, not your feelings. Feelings are data, but they're not always direction. And excuses are just feelings in disguise. There's a voice that lives underneath the excuses, the one that says, I know I can do more. That quiet instinct that flares up in the gaps when you're not numbing or scrolling or avoiding. That's the voice to listen to. That's the truth. It's not always loud. It's not always convenient, but it's always there. You just have to start choosing it. The more you act on that voice, the weaker the excuse voice gets. It starts to lose credibility. It starts to sound ridiculous because now you have proof. Proof that you can act without feeling ready. That you can show up even when the old habit fires. You can train this, just like you train the excuses. Repetition works both ways. Every time you override the excuse, you lay down a new track, a new identity. One built on discipline, not delay, on ownership, not avoidance, and that identity compounds. It becomes who you are, not someone who tries, not someone who wants, but someone who does. That shift doesn't require a total overhaul. Just a pattern interrupt, just a moment of honesty, just enough awareness to say, that's not the truth. That's just my old habit talking. And then you move anyway. Progress isn't glamorous. It doesn't come wrapped in excitement or instant reward. It's not the highlight reel you see online. It's not the motivational rush you feel for 5 minutes before going back to procrastination. Real progress is gritty. It's slow. It's repetitive. It's showing up when no one's watching, when no one's cheering, when the results aren't visible yet. It's not about massive wins. It's about consistent effort. The kind of effort that feels small while you're doing it but stacks up into something powerful over time. Progress doesn't show up like fireworks. It builds like pressure. Quietly, relentlessly. Everyone wants transformation, but nobody wants the repetition it takes to get there. You want the strength, but not the workout. You want the business, but not the late nights. You want the result, but not the routine. But that routine, that boring, unsexy daily commitment, that's the engine. That's where change happens. In the moments where you don't feel like it, but do it anyway. In the days where you're tired, distracted, frustrated, and still choose to show up. It's not the big bursts that define your progress. It's the small steps you take when it would have been easier to quit. There's this lie you've been sold that says progress has to feel good, that you should be inspired every step of the way, but inspiration is temporary, emotion is unstable. You can't build anything sustainable on a foundation that shifts with your mood. What you can build on is consistency, repetition, routine, the discipline to do the thing whether or not it looks impressive. Whether or not you feel excited. Progress isn't about feelings. It's about standards. And if your standard is to show up no matter what, you win. Not overnight, not immediately, but inevitably. The people you admire, the ones who seem to be crushing it, they're not riding some wave of perfect energy and motivation. They're just persistent. They've made peace with the boring stuff, the early mornings, the messy drafts, the rejections, the setbacks, and they kept going anyway. That's what separates them, not talent. Not luck, just that refusal to stop. You want to know who succeeds. It's not the most gifted. It's the most stubborn. The ones who keep moving forward even when the progress is invisible. Even when it looks like nothing's working. Because they understand that progress is happening underneath the surface, even when it hasn't shown up yet. You're not going to feel like it every day. That's not a weakness. That's being human. But you have to train yourself to act anyway. To push through the boredom, to do the reps, to write the pages, to make the calls. Progress doesn't care about how perfect your effort is. It cares about whether you're still in the game, whether you're showing up day in, day out, whether you're doing the thing long after the excitement wore off. That's when it starts to matter. That's when the shift happens. Some days you'll crush it. Other days, it'll feel like you're crawling. But here's the truth, crawling is still forward. Ugly progress is still progress. The days where you just barely hold the line, where you only do 10% of what you planned, those are the days that count the most. Because they prove something to yourself. They prove that you don't only show up when it's easy. They prove that your commitment isn't conditional. They prove that you're building something stronger than motivation. You're building identity. Progress also isn't linear. Some days you leap, some days you stall, some days you even slip backward. But as long as you don't stop, you're still in the fight. Setbacks aren't the enemy, quitting is. That voice in your head telling you it's not working, it's too slow, you're falling behind. That voice doesn't know what's being built in the dark. It doesn't see the internal shifts, the new patterns, the growing resilience. But it's happening. Every single time you persist through the messy middle, you're getting sharper, stronger, more dangerous, more prepared for the next level. Progress asks one thing from you: keep going. Even when it's inconvenient, even when you're not sure it's working, even when it feels like no one sees it, it's about outlasting the resistance, outlasting your old habits, outlasting the voice that says this isn't worth it. Because if you keep going long enough, it becomes worth it. Eventually, the results catch up. Eventually, the compound effect hits. Eventually, you look up and realize you're no longer who you used to be. Not because of one big moment, but because of thousands of small ones where you chose persistence over perfection. You keep waiting for clarity like it's going to arrive in a lightning bolt. Like one day, you'll wake up and everything will make sense. The path will be clear. The decision will be obvious. You'll feel totally confident and completely ready. But that's not how it works. Clarity is not something you wait for. It's something you earn. It doesn't come from sitting around thinking. It doesn't come from journaling, visualizing, planning it to death. It comes from moving. It comes from doing. It comes after action, not before it. Most people are stuck because they're trying to figure it all out in their head before they take the first step. They want certainty. They want guarantees. They want to know it's going to work out. So they wait, they stall, they research, they overthink. They convince themselves they're being responsible or strategic. But really, they're just scared to start. Because starting without clarity feels wrong. But that's the trick. Starting without clarity is exactly how you get it. The path doesn't appear until your feet are on it. You don't get the answers while standing still. You get them by moving forward, even if it's messy, even if it's confusing, even if you don't feel ready. You make a decision, you try something, and then you learn. You get feedback. You get data. You figure out what works and what doesn't. That's how clarity is created, not by thinking about it, but by doing something about it. Action reveals what hesitation hides. You're not going to think your way into your next level. You're not going to weight yourself into progress. You're going to have to act before you feel sure. You're going to have to take the job before you know if it's perfect. Launch the idea before you're done planning it. Start the habit before you believe you can sustain it. That's the deal. That's the uncomfortable truth no one wants to say out loud. But the people who move, who try, who fail, who course correct, those are the people who figure it out. Not because they were smarter, but because they were willing to go without knowing you've been lied to by perfectionism. You think you need a full plan, the perfect conditions, the right mindset, but you don't need any of that. You need a bias toward action. You need the courage to say, I don't have it all figured out, but I'm going anyway. Because when you do, you unlock something most people never reach. You build self-trust. You start to trust that even if you don't know the whole path, you'll figure it out. That you can handle the unknown. That you don't need clarity to begin. You need movement. Clarity is found in the reps. It lives in the process. You don't learn how to lead until you lead. You don't learn what your purpose is until you take a step towards something uncertain. You don't discover what you're capable of by playing it safe. Every single pivot, every new opportunity, every moment of insight you're looking for, it lives after you do something, after the risk, after the conversation, after the move. But most people never get there because they're trying to think their way into a result they can only reach through action. Waiting for clarity becomes the perfect excuse. It sounds smart. It sounds mature. But it's just fear with a mask on. You're not stuck because you're unclear. You're unclear because you're stuck. And the way you break out of that loop is not by sitting with it longer. It's by taking one uncomfortable step, and then another, It's in the doing that you realize what matters. It's in the showing up that you learn what works. And even if it's the wrong direction, you're still further ahead than the person standing still. Action gives you feedback. Feedback sharpens focus. Focus creates clarity. And the more you act, the more you learn what aligns, what fits, what drains you, what lights you up. But that only happens after the move. You can't predict your way there. You can't journal your way there. You do your way there. The most confident people aren't the ones who had clarity first. They're the ones who had the guts to act without it, and clarity followed. You keep looking for the sign. You keep asking for certainty, but the sign is the resistance you feel. That's your clue. That's the edge you need to step over. Not because you're ready, but because you're willing. The answers you're looking for are not on the sidelines. They're on the other side of action. Not someday, not later. Right now, you keep looking for confidence like it's a thing out there waiting to be discovered. Like one day, you'll wake up and suddenly, you'll just feel different. Bolder, stronger, ready. You think it'll hit you before the moment that matters, before the risk, before the leap. But confidence doesn't work like that. It's not something you find, it's something you build, one uncomfortable step at a time. One scary decision at a time. One action taken while shaking, doubting, hesitating. But doing it anyway. The problem is most people want to feel confident before they act confident. They wait for the feeling, the certainty, the inner fire to kick in. But that feeling doesn't come first. It's not the prerequisite. It's the result. Confidence shows up after you take the step, not before. It's earned in the moments where you decide not to run, not to hide, not to delay. It's built in the reps, the repetition of showing up even when you're scared, of trying, failing, and realizing you're still standing. That's where real confidence is forged. In the fire of follow through. You weren't born lacking confidence. You just built habits of self-doubt. You practiced hesitation. You rehearsed playing small. And now that feels like who you are. But it's not who you are. It's just what you've repeated. And what you repeat, you reinforce. So if you want to become confident, you have to build new reps. You have to start practicing courage before you feel ready, because courage is the gateway. Confidence is just the residue that's left behind after you've acted bravely enough, often enough, to prove to yourself that you can handle it. Confidence is built in the decisions you make when no one's clapping. It's built in